Hello, I'm Mark Griffiths from Wrexham AFC, and it's time for another Ask Wrexham podcast, in which I like to answer your questions that you've raised on the Ask Wrexham hashtag. That's ASKWXM on Blue Sky and Twitter? Blue Sky and Twitter. So, before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. Of course, like I said, you can get in touch on those platforms. Also, I've opened up a WhatsApp channel for Final Whistle. I'll plop the link down below, and if you want to, you can use that to keep in touch, and I'll try and keep you abreast of what stuff is going on. Anyway, let's get moving. There's some interesting questions. Tim Cole says, how do soccer organisations of promotion and relegation gear up financially when they rise up the ranks? I wonder why you wouldn't have thought that question of all things right now. I know the Rob Ryan effect has helped in these lower levels, but Championship and Premier League are different levels. Well, yes, it is such an issue, isn't it, at the moment, exercising Wrexham fans. If we were to go up, how do we cope? And there is clearly a major scaling up of your finances. However, I mean, I know I'm going to sound a touch naive saying this, but I do think that while, there is a financial chasm between the Championship and League One, it's not impossible to bridge. I mean, look at the way that teams recently, Ipswich and Luton, have been able to get up and through the Championship. I think every club's circumstance is different, and if you recruit well, if you spend well, if you are well organised, if you get more bang for your buck, I think it can be managed. The other thing to remember, of course, is that there will be a big difference in terms of the economy in League One to the Championship. There's also a big increase in income, mostly because of the TV deal. So I would argue you do get a lot of money to play with. I mean, you see some teams in the Premier League, and let's be honest, this season and last season are rather implying that teams that come up from the Championship are finding that's the real chasm. I mean, this season, the three teams that came up are going to come straight back down again without putting up that much of a fight. But there are some teams who I think view getting promoted as a bit of a loss leader, if you will. You can get promoted and then you will come back down again, but you will get payments, massive Premier League TV payments in that year, and then you will get 3 years of parachute payments, which give you a serious advantage over the Championship, the rest of the Championship, and you can maybe view it as, being a yo-yo club as a way to broaden your sort of financial strength and allow you to go up and down, and then you'll have enough sort of TV money in your back pocket to try and establish yourself higher up. I'm not saying I'd advocate that, and certainly I don't think that the same applies in terms of between the Championship and League One. But well, let's see. Let's see what happens if we make it. Well, no guarantee we're going to make it anyway. Just one other point I want to make, saying about systems of promotion and relegation. I would argue, in some ways, those systems, which of course are the norm in football, are more of a concern for teams going down when it comes to ownership. Owners like stability. I mean, that's why we're seeing all the big clubs trying to draw the ladder up behind them, and not let other teams get in on the act. That's why you see in the Premier League that the teams that are already established as having loads of money and being the very top end of that don't really like it when upstart clubs like Newcastle get money put into them. They want to sort of draw a line in the sand and say, right, you can't. Investment doesn't help you. Invested money can't be spent, so we stay as the elite. Just like the whole idea about this European Super League. Well, let's have all the big European teams in it, and then everyone else tough. You're not allowed it. I mean, the reason I want that is stability of investment. Oh, if I know my team's always going to be in Europe, always going to be in the Champions League, then I can make financial plans. Relegation is the thing that scares owners, I would say. The idea that you can't budget because you don't know what level you're going to be in. That's not our problem, though, for a year or so. Let's hope I'm right. Okay, next one now then. A Fennel says, To the people of Wrexham, with the stadium rebuild, wouldn't you like a covered pitch? And talks about the atmosphere in British Columbia, Vancouver Whitecaps. The game goes on because they can close the dome. No need to reschedule because of weather. And I'm recording this on Wednesday night, and in 45 minutes we'll see Real Madrid kicking off against Arsenal, and Real Madrid have applied for special permission to close the roof on the Santiago Bernabeu, which has been massively redeveloped and now has a roof. And it's okay. Part of the idea with roofs that people think about in football, atmosphere. Keeps the atmosphere in, makes it more intimidating. And Real Madrid, big part of their DNA, if you will, their identity is La Remontada, the fight back. The number of times they've taken on a European second leg at the Bernabeu and they're behind and they roar back and pull off remarkable comebacks, and I think they feel that having an intimidating atmosphere, the roof closed, is one of them. So I think, okay, from that perspective, I think people in Britain quite like the roof, but I don't get the impression people are really all that sold on covered football stadia. Wembley has a roof. They'll keep it uncovered if they possibly can. I think there are concerns about the levels of humidity in grounds which have got the roof on. And I'm not, I know, maybe I'm wrong. I'm happy to be proven wrong on this. But in Britain, despite the horrible weather we've been having the last year or two, it's still a temperate climate. And will it make that much difference? I mean, they tend to put the roofs on when there's bad weather during a game. Would they put it over because there's snow forecast? How would the pitch cope? I don't know. I'm not a groundsman with the roof being on for any length of time if there's a month of bad weather. I don't know. I really don't know. I just get the feeling that in Britain people aren't that eager about it. I asked my son, decided he'd be the British everyman, and he said, a football ground with a roof on it isn't a football ground, it's a basketball court. So, there you go. I think that's a fairly common attitude, that football grounds don't tend to have a cover, I think. I'd also say that I don't think that's feasible of Wrexham. I mean, we're a long way off having all four sides redeveloped, and you look at stadia with roofs, retractable or otherwise, they tend to have stands that are roughly the same heights, and at the moment we most certainly don't have that. And we have the Mold Road stand, the one which you would assume would be the last one to get any attention to because it's the newest, which doesn't go up at the ends. So don't get me wrong, I mean, populists seem to be rather good at what they do. They appear to know what they're doing, but there's a challenge if they did go down that road. I don't think that's on the agenda. It would put a hell of a lot of extra cost onto it as well, you'd imagine. So I don't reckon we'll be seeing that anytime soon myself. Janie Lightning, are all fouls in the box awarded as penalties? No. So you got direct free kicks and indirect free kicks in the football. Most free kicks that you see in games are direct free kicks. You kick somebody, you handball it, it's a free kick, it's a direct free kick, which means you can score directly from it. You can shoot and score. Therefore, a direct free kick foul in the box is a penalty. You're quite right. But there are also indirect free kicks. Now, these are for minor offences or less serious offences. Offside, for example, is indirect. Let's not talk about conceding an offside in your own penalty area. But, things like obstructions. You stand in someone's way. You don't foul them, you don't kick them, but you do stop them getting to the ball. That's an indirect free kick. A goalkeeper picking up a back pass is an indirect free kick. So those would be in the penalty area. You don't see them very often, and when you do, they tend to be huge fun, but they also tend to be, if you don't mind me quoting Shakespeare, a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing, because there'll be a big drama and the defending team will put their entire side on the goal line if it's close enough, if it's within 10 yards of the goal, and the goalkeeper will be there ready to go charging out once the ball is touched, because of course indirect, it's got to be touched to somebody, and it's all very exciting, and you've got 21 players in the 6-yard box, and the ball is so close to the goal, and the attacking team gets excited. And then it's very rarely a goal, because there's so many bodies in there, even though you think we must score, we're so close to goal. Those bodies block it out. So, yeah, you can get free kicks in the penalty area to the attacking team. They tend to be quite exciting, but actually completely insignificant. Now then, Cryptic points out this is from our Virtue Trophy semi-final. I wonder who'll win that. Peterborough had written instructions on the field. Have you ever seen that before? One of their players had a piece of paper he was looking at, another one or two stood round, then he tore it up on the field late in the game. Yes, I've seen it happen. It's not common, but it does happen. I remember it first happening, 10 years ago. Somebody noticed a team doing this, and there was a lot of pointing fingers and laughing. Seems reasonable enough to me. If you're going to reorganise your team, okay, you work on things in training, and a lot of changes. Look at Wrexham. When we go to 4 at the back, if we're chasing a game, the players know what to do. I mean, us in the crowd, we know the shape of what he's going to do and can work out which players will fit which gaps. But, so they'll have prepared that beforehand, so they probably don't need to say anything other than, they probably don't need to say anything, because when you bring off Owen O'Connell and you bring on Jack Marius, you're switching to that system. But, there's only, I'm sure the players will say, okay, right, it's a diamond, let's do it. And they know where they're going to slot in. But sometimes you might make an off the hoof decision or alteration, so, it seems logical, but I don't know if it's a football thing or a British thing. We don't like innovation. We don't like people doing things differently. So, yeah, it tends to be mocked. But yeah, you see players doing it. I don't think I've ever seen someone rip it up and throw it on the pitch, though. That's a new one on me. There is the wonderful example. Well, hang on. Is it a wonderful example? There was, in the last but one World Cup, I'm going to say, England beat Colombia on penalties, and somebody took a photo of Jordan Pickford, the England goalkeeper's water bottle, and he had stuck on it the names of all the potential Colombian penalty takers and what they prefer to do from penalties. So the goalkeeping coach had done all the research, and Pickford had that to refer to on the pitch. Nice example of notes being used very effectively, although he had that stuck on his bottle already. I'm trying to think, has there been a case where somebody has seen those notes? I feel like there has been, and it's not quite coming to me, and being able to sort of, second guess what the person who received the note has got. I mean, that's the only reason I can think of to rip it up. I can't imagine Ollie Rathbone stopping running and picking up a note and seeing what the other side are doing. It seems a bit counterintuitive. Mind you, I also can't imagine Ollie Rathbone stopping running. So it's a redundant question, perhaps. Not question, hypothesis from me. Tithe Pale Droid says, odd stat, I like this. The women's team shared the points with 4 of the 7 other teams, TNS, Cardiff, Barry and Swansea. Only one losing record, Britain Ferry, and 2 winning records, Aberystwyth and Cardiff Met. I think that's very interesting. It reveals a lot, I think, because to me, well, firstly, to fully understand it, you've got to remember that we had a season of 2 halves. The first season, I thought we played quite well, but the results weren't coming. And then the second half, the results did come in spectacular manner. And so in some ways, those records against those teams follow that split. So Cardiff City, phase 1, played 2, lost 2. Cardiff City, phase 2, played 2, won 2. And so that illustrates beautifully, doesn't it, really? We end up evens with them, but the direction of travel has been very positive for us, and I think that's summing up the season. I think you could say the same about Swansea, couldn't you, really? We start off against Swansea with this habit of always managing to lose 3-2. We end up against Swansea by beating them 3-2 on their own ground and walloping them 5-0. It could have been 10. So I find that interesting. The losing record to Britain Ferry, I think, is an indication of the unique problems that Britain Ferry offer you. They're a long ball team who are difficult to play against, and certainly the only women's team that I've seen against Wrexham who are able to execute that sort of game plan with any efficiency, and execute it with a lot of efficiency. I noticed Reece James, their managers, left them that, so it'll be interesting to see if they can replicate their terrific impact from this season in next season. But even given that, if we'd won at the racecourse against them, we would have a winning record against them. So, fine-ish margins. Interesting to see the Aberystwyth and Cardiff Met are the two teams that we had a winning record against when they're the two bottom teams. Although ironically, good, you need to be able to put away the lower teams. Ironically, of course, it looked like we'd failed to get into Phase 2 because our worst result by a distance of the season was drawing at Cardiff Met, a team who were not managing to win points at all. And that was one that at the time looked to have killed us off completely. So, yeah, that's interesting. Even though it's a winning record, it maybe wasn't quite as winning a record as you'd have liked. But it's a good way of looking at it. It is very interesting. And I think the fact that you've got Cardiff, TNS and Swansea, so the top and third teams, and another team that are traditionally amongst the top two, who we have been equal with, and our record against all of them has improved as the season's gone on, tells you nice positive things about the potential for next season, doesn't it? Now then, the messy coda. This was the end of a long thread that you put out, which was really interesting, about Peterborough winning the league, about winning the Virtue Trophy, about Darren Ferguson. It was really, really interesting. I've gone to the very sharp end of it, but it's worth reading on Blue Sky. It says, so is a league manager's job safe if he doesn't get the team promoted to the Championship and stays in a league that they can perform in? He's saying about Darren Ferguson, like taking Peterborough up to the Championship, getting sacked because they don't stay up there, whereas if he just stayed on the fringes of the playoffs, or indeed this year, flirted with relegation, he keeps his job. If the owners know that their team isn't strong enough to compete in the higher leagues, why rush to fire their managers only to bring them back a few years later, which happened with Ferguson? Yes. Trouble is, some team owners are grown-ups like that and can think, right, there's no point in panicking here. A manager who's done a brilliant job getting you promoted deserves to keep hold of their job, but the majority, I think, don't. They respond to the immediate, and you see so many managers do work miracles and get teams into the Premier League, for example, and then get sacked because they've overperformed themselves. Look what happened at Southampton this season, for example. Credit to Ipswich, who have, at the end of last season, everyone was talking about their manager Kieran McKenna absolutely pulling off a miracle by getting them into the Premier League. They're going to come back down. Although, to be fair, their fans have stuck with them, and Ipswich have always traditionally been a very stable club. It doesn't, for years they were owned by the Cobbold family, and for years they appoint a manager and they'd be there for an absolute eternity. So maybe that's part of their personality as well, their approach. But there's no sign that McKenna's going to pay for achieving something brilliant with his job, even when they come straight back down again. And personally, I think that's sensible. I think you trust that person to get you back up again. He's proven himself. But I'd say the majority of club owners don't tend to see things that way. And then also, following on from that, so those of us who remember life back in League Two when Brian Carey became Wrexham manager back in 2007 instead of Fergie, would you have preferred to have Ferguson? And in an alternative reality where Ferguson was Wrexham manager getting the team to the Championship, what would have happened next? Well, that last point, the financial gaps weren't the same because TV money hadn't kicked in as much in the 90s. There wasn't as much of a stretch between the leagues. So if that Wrexham side had managed to, so I'll say the Brian Flynn side, that sort of scenario, had won in the playoffs and gone up, I think we'd be competitive. I think we'd probably be down the bottom end, but I think we'd be competitive. In those days, more to the point, should Ferguson have been appointed rather than Carey? I don't know either or. Brian Carey, a brilliant, experienced man who was a brilliant servant of the club. I must admit, looking from the outside, you thought, they're going to go for Ferguson here. Ferguson was always going to go into management, and was always going to be somebody who got a lot of attention going into management because of the identity of his dad. And we were obviously in pole position to give him that first job. But those sorts of appointments don't always work out. I mean, I think, to be fair to Ferguson, he's proven over the years that he is a capable manager. Brian Carey has worked for a lot of big clubs since he left us as well, though. And he did save us in that first season from relegation. So, yeah, who knows? Who knows? I think the big thing you could say for appointing Ferguson, I guess, is that we probably start getting tasty Man United loan players. And as Alex Ferguson was the dawn of English football management, it may well be that other clubs might loan us players. He might well put in a good word to people in terms of helping Darren out. That's certainly a possibility. But beyond that, who knows? Who knows? Now then, Jason, the Wrexham Phoenix, and there's a lot of this, I just feel that I've got to reflect this message about Del Morgan, who had a last league game for us, remember, last weekend. Wrexham legend has played a final match today. We'll miss you, Del. And a great picture with the old Super Del Morgan in goal song. It was nice to hear that at TNS. And then saying thank you for the memories, wishing you a happy and fulfilling retirement. And I just want to say Jason speaks on behalf of all of us. Del, a person who has contributed an enormous amount to the club, not just on the pitch but off it, and with the work that she does with players and young players alike, absolutely an example to all of us. And there is more of a grassroots feel to the women's setup, which frankly means that people like Del can actually have, I think, exponentially more of an influence. She's more accessible almost, and as a result of that, she can do a lot of good. And that is just, I was thrilled last year, for example, Erin Lovett won the Community Player of the Year award. Yeah, exactly, because there's a scale to the women's setup which allows players to be able to go out and make impacts on people's lives as well. And Del certainly did that. And oh my gosh, performance of the season for either men or women, surely at TNS, when in her League Swan song she just repelled TNS. Lexi Jones must be thinking, why does Del Morgan hate me this much? Because she could have scored a hatful, but Del would not be beaten by it. Well, she was once, because she was left with a player one-on-one who could draw Del out and pass to Jones. But Del Morgan, absolute legend, quite right to pay tribute to her, as so many of you did. Jim Zaroli, can you explain what the UEFA licensing means? Are the women now able to play in Europe if they win the league next year? Jim, you have answered your own question. You're absolutely right. So the UEFA licensing is in preparation for next season, because the champions of the Welsh League will go into the Champions League, and so we applied for that. And it means that, yes, we would be able to host games in the Champions League. Now, the way the Women's Champions League works is a qualifying ground. That's what the Welsh champions go into. And you play a mini group of 4 teams. And that is hosted by one of those teams. So wouldn't it be a wonderful thought that we could perhaps host a group qualifier at some point and bring European football back to Wrexham? That would be amazing, wouldn't it? There's also a sort of Europa League version opening up in women's football. However, it's the problem with that is that how many teams from each country go into it is based on that country's coefficient. So UEFA work out each league's coefficient based on their results in Europe. And I mean no disrespect whatsoever in saying this about Cardiff, but they've been deserving champions, but they haven't been able to get into the next stage. They haven't been able to get through that qualifying group. That's just a comment on where the Welsh League fits in at the moment in the European pecking order. Same with the men's league to a great extent. So we are third bottom in terms of coefficients in all of Europe, which means we are not getting a place in that tournament anytime soon. Who knows? Maybe we're the guys who can come along and make the difference. Stand aside, the Reds are coming. Or maybe not, who knows. Oh, now this was a great chat. I had to share this. During the TNS match, we were talking about the plate, the Adran Premier Plate. And the questions, what is it? Basically, it's the trophy that's played for by the bottom 4 teams in the league, while the top 4 play for the championship. I posited it that clubs don't really want to win it because you want to be in the top half. I'm definitely right in that. But I also suggested that it doesn't exist. It's just a theory. And Welsh Techie stepped up to the plate magnificently and said his wife played a part in designing it, and indeed he had it in his car for a week. And here we are. There it is, if you're watching it on the video, and I've got to say, that is a handsome trophy. That is a lovely looking trophy, that is. And like I said, nobody wants to be in the bottom half and win it, but that's a nice trophy, isn't it? So Swansea have won that this year. So when you see Adran Premier Championship and Plate, Championship's the top half in the second phase, Plate is the bottom half. It's a nice thing, isn't it? I was impressed with that. Have a look at it. Oh. Chip Pate asks, what are the salary caps and payroll rules in the Adran Premier Semi-Pro League? Does anything other than locating and arranging outside jobs prevent clubs from offering packages, guaranteed part-time outside jobs paired with part-time football to attract players who would need to relocate? And yeah, right, as far as I can see, and I will ask the question to people who can answer this directly, but there doesn't appear to be any restriction to anything. There don't appear to be salary caps or anything. I read through the Adran Premier rulebook yesterday. I can't see any reference at all to salary caps. I'm not aware of people offering those sorts of inducements, you know, have a job. I think Ron Wilkes said in that, in replying to it, you know, it's like US college sports offering a sort of inducement, a part-time job, you know, locally to go with your semi-pro wage. I'm not aware of that happening at all. No, I really don't think we've done that at all. I don't think anybody has. It used to happen in the good old days. In fact, if you look back through Wrexham's history, you'll see a lot of Scottish players in times in the 50s and 40s and 30s when there wasn't that much social mobility in Britain. And the reason for that was coal mining. Lots of Scottish coal miners looking for jobs. If they were good footballers, Ali McGowan, Tommy Bannon, a couple of absolute legends of the club come to mind, they would be enticed down by a wage from Wrexham, but we wouldn't pay massively, and you know, footballers wouldn't get paid during the summer in those days, no matter what level you are. The famous thing, isn't there, Tom Finney, one of the all-time great English players who played for Preston, and in the summer was a plumber. And so you could get, you know, one of the best players in Europe, if not the world, turning up in July to sort your sink out. Really, seriously. So that's how it used to work. And like I said, people like McGowan would be given shifts down the mines and also would be paid by Wrexham. So that used to happen in the men's game. Not aware of that at all in the women's game, though. Oh, Ron Wilk again says, why are TNS called Wem Town Ladies FC when I Google the final score of today's match? This is a complicated one. I don't want to throw in a question from Janie Lightning. I couldn't find the screen capture asking about if TNS are the new Saints, who are the old Saints. So I'll start off with that and then lead on to the Wem thing. Because I actually answered it on Sunday, and then afterwards thought, hang on, I don't think I actually completed the story and answered the question fully. So the new Saints were initially called TNS, and that stood for Total Network Solutions, because their owner Mike Harris bought them. He accumulated his wealth by through his company, Total Network Solutions, so an IT company, and so he bought the club and he named them Total Network Solutions, and that was the case for a long time. And then I'm not sure what where the jurisdiction came from, but there was you weren't allowed to have sponsors' names as your team name. I remember when I was a kid, Coventry used to have a lot of car factories, and they were sponsored by Talbot, which was a company which was bought up by Chrysler, and they had it was the Talbot logo was a T. There's a shock, and their shirt was a T shape, had a T shape on it, and they tried to change their name to Coventry Talbot and was stopped. Well, obviously So Network Solutions were allowed to do that for a while. Then they were told they couldn't. So obviously they're known as TNS, so they changed their name to the New Saints. They were formed by the merger of two clubs. Oswestry United, they bought Oswestry Town. Harris bought. He also bought a Welsh team in the Welsh Pyramid from a little village nearby, LlanSant Fried and Mechan. And so Sant means saint, so the New Saints, I guess they can use that. They merged them together, and then you could have Oswestry's players, but you could use the LlanSant Fried registration to be in the Welsh Pyramid. Does that make sense? And the Wem Town thing is basically, I've got to say, it does surprise me, but the Google do this, and you wonder why they do it in a way. But my understanding is that a couple of years ago, TNS essentially took over Wem Town's women's setup, and that became TNS's women's setup. Wem is a town a bit further south, but not that far away. And why Google continue to refer to them as that, I don't know. But they do. That's all I've got. And that is all I've got. I'm clearing off now. Final Whistle Weekly coming up soon. And a big Easter weekend. Let's crack on and get some good results there, hey? It's been a pleasure as always answering your questions. Keep them coming, keep them coming. Get onto that WhatsApp channel and I'll try to keep you abreast of what's going on. I'm Mark Griffiths from Wrexham AFC and this has been the Ask Wrexham podcast.